I did some reading because I was speaking to a fellow who works in the business. He's not an electrical engineer, I don't think. He's just a technician, a low-level technician, but I suggested he goes to my website and look at the simulator, and the first circuit that you come to by default is called Power Factor 2. It's one of Paul Falstad's circuits. And I think the only thing I did to modify it was to add all the text, because I realized it could save money on the electric bill because it recycles electrical energy in-house and does not send all of it to the grid right away. So I thought, well, I don't understand this stuff, so why don't I start reading about it? So one thing led to another. The power factor led to reactive power, and what impact that reactive power has on a motor load. So what they were saying kind of echoed a little bit what Jim Murray had said during his presentation in 2013, wherein he saved a Bechtel, what were they called? Steel in Michigan. If it is Bechtel steel, lots of money because on their power bill, on their electric bill, because they were paying through the nose for both the power to run their motor equipment. It was like rock shoveling equipment or something. So there's a lot of power, being spent on the motors to run that rock equipment, but they also had to pay through the nose for the electrical energy to power the coils to create the magnetic field so that the motor would run, despite the fact that that energy was sent back to the grid unused, unspent, with no losses. Because there's no conversion, it's just charging up the field of the coil, and then it's discharged back to the source, in this case the grid. So you would think the meter should run backwards to accommodate that, but the electrical company didn't allow that. They made them be charged for everything. So what Jim Murray did, he put a synchronous motor, synchronous AC generator or AC motor. He installed it. It was a huge thing, and they saved a humongous amount of money on their bill because they didn't have to pay for that energy that they weren't spending anyway. They were just sending it back to the grid when they didn't need it. Now, and I also reread what Eric Dollard was talking about. He did the same thing. Before he attempted to use a solid-state system of capacitors and condensers, he never got around to doing it because people came in and destroyed his lab almost the minute he started. I forget which one it was, that Bolinas or Landers. No, I think he said Bolinas, the RCA, the old RCA station that nobody was using. Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, but he did in Richmond. He didn't use solid state. He didn't use capacitors and coils. He used a synchronous, either generator or motor. I can't remember which. And he was supplying all the power and then some extra. He was supplying more power to the city of Richmond, this is in the San Francisco Bay Area, than what they were consuming, and that's why they had a total blackout, because the company's not used to something like that happening. Who's supplying us with power, And so all the trucks showed up, and they basically kicked them off the shipyard. So it got me thinking. And then there's this statement that I read. So if you don't have reactive power supplied to magnetize the coils along with your real power, then you have to supply extra power to make up the difference, which means it's going on in my mind, there's some kind of conversion happening maybe, but it's at the expense of the motor heating up extra than what it would have otherwise had you not used brute force of purely supplying, exclusively supplying regular power, real power, to make up the difference. And so I'm thinking, wait a second. By definition, reactive power has a relationship with real power, right? It's the reaction that a coil or a capacitor has when power is fed to it. Because I looked at the power factor 2 circuit in Paul Falstead's simulator again, and this time I realized, no, wait a second, because they define the maximum reaction of power to be 90 degrees out of phase, either the amps or the volts. One or the other leads the other. So I looked at this Paul Falstead's circuit, power factor 2. That's, by default the first circuit you see when you go to my clone of his simulator on my website. And I saw that the capacitor was opposite the coil of wire. If I have it correct, the capacitor, the amps, led the volts by 90 degrees, while the coil of wire, the volts, led the amps by 90 degrees, and the AC power source was the same as the inductor. The volts led the amps by 90 degrees. So I'm thinking, well, wait a second, if the AC is already screwing, and I haven't even done anything to use the energy yet, then who the hell is complaining? So, obviously they must balance it before it reaches us, but when it comes out raw from the AC generator at the power plant, it's coming out already screwed up. So I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck? Who cares? And, I was worrying for nothing because my intuition was telling me, don't worry about it, And I'm thinking, but I want to understand it, why I'm not supposed to worry about it. So, and then when I looked at the resistors in that power factor 2 circuit, they were on the mark. The voltage and the amps were perfectly in sync. Power factor of unity. Perfect. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, well, let's see. If the resistors are always going to be in unity, or they should be if the energy itself is in unity, then I don't have to worry about what the inductor is showing me in the oscilloscope. It's a mistake to look at the inductor and think, oh my god, it's out of phase, It's supposed to be, because that's what inductors do. They screw with the energy that enters into them. And the same thing with capacitors, but in reverse. So the only thing that matters is looking at a resistor alongside whatever it is I'm considering to be the load, in this case an inductor. And if the resistor has its amps and volts in phase, in sync, then I don't have to worry. And that's what I did. I looked at the magnetic amplifier circuits again, this time scoping the resistors adjacent to the inductor, the inductive load, and it was fine. It was totally in sync. Needless to say, I was overjoyed because I think it's the only over unity circuit which does not escalate to infinity when it's exhibiting sine waves. The breakthrough circuit, the over unity breakthrough circuit, that one is strictly a one modality situation in which all it does is exhibit sine waves because it's tied, because of the way it's set up. Yeah, it escalates while it sloshes in AC modality, AC formation. It escalates at the same time, but I've since learned don't do that. So this magnetic amplifier, I have it two modalities. One is it rises, and the other is it coasts and slowly dissipates, entropically dissipates, thermodynamically. But when it's escalating, it's just a surge that hyperbolically, logarithmically arcs up to infinity. very interesting. Some kind of division going on, infinite division. But when it's cruising, it turns into an AC sine wave. So it's really the best simulation I've come up with to date. In terms of practicality, it's the only one that has any relevance to actually being considered to be used. Can we use this? Well, maybe. Let's see. The others, it's like, they're a shot in the dark, and they're interesting, and they show all sorts of different features of electrodynamic behavior, but you can't use them. And so it was a good thing that I got involved with Joseph Newman, because it got me to think, okay, well, stop trying to come up with circuits of my own and just simulate what other people have done. Now, somebody has asked me, well, can you simulate Gerard Morin? Well, I don't think he does Eric Dollard's LMD module. He does his own thing, and so I'm not inclined to do so. I like to stick with what I know looks like an LMD module right off the bat on its face, and I don't have to go, well, where's the capacitance? It must be hiding somewhere, because usually, you get these circuit, and it's usually not capacitor oriented, and then you have to wonder, okay, where's the capacitance? If it's over unity, it's got to have capacitance. It's not just inductance. There's no way. According to Eric Dollard, you got to have magnetism and electrostatics and time, and to make the synthesis of electricity. You've got to have a varying electrostatic field with a magnetic field immersed in that varying electrostatic field over time, and then you've got your synthesis going on. Or the other way, maybe you're decomposing, but whatever. So it really made me think. It didn't make me change anything, but I did change one thing, and I haven't posted it yet, so I'm not going to post this video till I do. I took the circuit that was inspired by Don Smith, and it was an attempt to try to do what he did, thinking, well, maybe, I'll mix and match, a little bit of Donald Smith, a little bit of Eric Dollard. Wrong answer. It's good to stick with one master, one teacher, and don't mix and match. It's not a good idea. It doesn't work with yoga, and it doesn't work with circuit construction either. So what I did was I took out the air core pair of coils, each was flipped, they were counterwound, because there was no magnetic interplay between them. They were simply connected in parallel in the circuit. So I took them out, but I left the capacitor on the right-hand side, the variable capacitor that regulates the frequency of the circuit. And that was set at 100 picofarads, unlike the other two LMD capacitors that were down to 1 picofarad. So I took out the pair of counterwound coils, and I put in a transformer. And at first I thought, well, why don't I do a swapped coil direction situation? And maybe it's an improvement, maybe it's not. I can't tell the difference. So I just went with default, Don't try to have a pair of swap coils on the transformer. But the magnetizable core boosted the power. I'm imagining that's why. It just it added a boost at the load, at the location of the load, despite the fact that I lowered the coupling coefficient to 0.5, but I kept the henries the same as the pair of coils I took away, half a henry on each, the primary and secondary. So, despite the low coupling coefficient, it actually boosted the circuit. And I thought, cool. And then, because you cannot scope a transformer, so I had to scope the resistors adjacent to the coil. I kept the same resistors that I had, just carried over from the two counterwound coils. I just passed them on to the transformer, the two pairs of resistors, one pair for each coil on the transformer, and it worked out fine. So I'm really enthusiastic that this magnetic amplifier concept of Niles Steiner monkeyed with a little bit, modified a little bit by me. I monkeyed with it without my banana. Well, actually, I don't know. I'm looking at my banana. I guess I do have a banana. And it actually enthralls me because the output is an AC sine wave, and if I look only at the resistors adjacent to the load coil, the volts and amps are in sync, 100% in sync. I couldn't be happier. And it's all over Unity. It's for free. So my contention is, if you can get away with using real power to make up the difference for the lack of reactive power to power an inductive load by using brute force and overheat the coil, the inverse should be the case. You should be able to use a brute force of exclusively the use of reactive power to make up for your lack of real power, and not overheat the coil. The coil won't heat up at all. Somebody gave me an argument on YouTube. Say, well, all that, he was looking at my lightning oscillator, all that energy is going to heat the thing up like crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, no, wait a second. Now, well, no, I said right off the bat to him, no, that's not the case, because I was sure it was radiant energy, without actually knowing what I was saying. Well, now I know it probably is true, because it's based, again, on Eric Dollar's LMD module at its core, which means it's generating all its energy as a reactive format, which means it's cold electricity. Duh. That's what reactive power is. It's their name for cold electricity. Peter Lindemann wrote a whole book on this subject, and he gave lectures, and John Bedini, talked about it. So, and Eric says it's the kind of thing that doesn't fry you, it heals you. So they call it reactive power. Say, well, you can't really use it because it's not it's not real power. But they say you can use real power to make up for the lack of reactive power. So what the? I doubt it's a one-way street. So much of electricity is a dualism, like a bifurcation of functionality, in which one leg of the bifurcation is the mirror image of the other. So I really doubt. But see, nobody thinks you can generate reactive power. And that's why they call it reactive power, to give it a certain twist. Say, well, yeah, but that's the reaction to the use of real power, so how can you just exclusively come up with reactive power? So that's why they never say what would happen if all you did was supply reactive power without any real power being supplied to the load. That's why. Because they've already slanted their perspective to slant ours, so that we don't ask the smart question, the $100,000 question. Inflation has raised it from the $64,000 question. Well, in 1950s, that's 70 years ago. It should be more than 100,000. It should be $2 million question. So that's what I'm thinking now. And because it's one thing to do a thing. It's another thing to be able to talk about it using their vernacular. Steal their words and use them, and then I get criticized for using scientific terms to make it sound like it's official. They got a response for everything. But hey, if it waddles like a goose, it must be a goose, It can't be a duck. It's got to be a goose. Otherwise, it'd be waddling like a duck. So, I don't know. Even despite the fact they may waddle similarly, I'm sure they have their distinct, unique qualities to each of them. So it's like, good grief, I really don't have anything to worry about. In addition to, now I can talk about it, not merely the way Eric Dollar talks about it, but the way the electrical engineers talk about it. I'm prepared. Either way, I can flip either way. No harm done. No trees harmed in the making of this video. Nope. We go out and we hug our trees. Nice tree. When you think about it, if you have free energy, what do you need trees for? To build homes or to make paper, when you could probably make it out of rock. I've heard stories that there's a technique for making anything out of anything, and I've heard stories that there is a small commune tucked away, hidden away, something that most people wouldn't know about, But I'm telling you, and I won't tell you where it is or what they're called, but they make everything out of rock. They make the most plush sofa out of rock. And they tunnel under a mountain. Already, I'm giving you a hint who they are or where they are. They live in caves that they create, and they make the walls like light up iridescent, soft, ambient lighting, and they choose locations to tunnel through to exhibit certain veins in the rock that are very beautiful, like precious stones, veins of precious stones or gold, so that it gives a little nice touch, a little interior decorating going on by selecting where they do their tunneling. So it's like, okay, because so, and then what about the Venin? However we pronounce the Venin theory. There's a variation on anything, infinite variation in electrodynamics. Not to say they're all useful, or efficient, or not wasteful, but there is an infinite quantity of variations to get the same job done, to have exactly the same output. So it's like, hello, just nobody. We've been programmed to think, well, you don't create reactive power, you create power, and then you have its reaction, You create AC power, and you have its AC reaction. But not according to Eric Dollar, because when you look at his gizmo, his LMD gizmo, that's purely a reactive power it's putting out, and it's all for free. All you need is an inception of energy to get it going. And once it gets going, it's free. So that's what Eric Dollard was talking about. He was manifesting reactive power. When he talks about the synthesis of electricity, he doesn't say which kind it is, and it's possibly because it doesn't matter. Could quite be. You never know. I know he talks about reactive power. I remember, but I can't remember where and what the context was, but I know he does. So I just can't remember if he was referring to the LMD module or not. So, it kind of makes you wonder. What are these people thinking when they tell us, well, here, let me help you out. You have a question? Good, I can answer it. And sell an agenda at the same time, a policy, enforce, encourage. Because you discourage its opposite, because we don't talk about it, and you choose the right words, reactive power, so nobody gets the idea that you can produce reactive power from just a little tiny inception of real power to get reactive power going on its own as a self-running, perpetual motion production affair. Huh? Who would want to do that? Nobody questions. I feel very foolish in going to Wikipedia and monkey with their article on perpetual motion machine. They've got an article on that. And I said, well, what about a perpetual motion machine that does nothing but manifest reactive power? What do you think then? And I know who to ask, who's an electrical engineer who's already helped me out a lot. So I know him by name. We have a relationship and a rapport. He's been very helpful, very merciful and kind and compassionate to try to help me see his point of view, and then he kind of backed off and just left me alone when he realized I'm not curable at all. I'm not willing to work with the conventional view. I got to keep promoting mine instead. So it's a semi-relationship. It's a little tattered, a little torn, the trust value, but it's still there. He still, helps out. It's just he doesn't take such an active role anymore. He doesn't sweat anymore, over me. He's doing okay playing with his toys, leave him alone. Playing with his fabrication of ideologies. But this is very intriguing, and I could ask him, because it's an area that it's new to me, and it really makes me question, well, what is this? Is reactive power really cold electricity because it doesn't supply any heat to the motor coil? It will not heat the motor, or excuse me, it will not heat the inductive load, the coil. So I'm thinking, that's exactly what all these wizards of free energy have been telling us. That I go to these conferences and they tell us it's cold electricity. Oh, it's reactive power. Oh my God. Oh wait, we're not supposed to be able to use that. Then how come the wizards say we can, and conventional wisdom says we can't? Yet they, in the same breath, they tell us, but you can use real power to make up the difference. So that's really what I got to ask this guy. What gives? And Thephenin, everything is invertible in the electrical field. I don't know of one thing other than batteries that is non-reversible. I can't think of anything that's non-reversible. They'll claim, well, you use the power, you can't reuse it. But no, if you put a capacitor in parallel with your inductive load and your meter on the outside of your building, you've just recycled your energy. 90% of it. And so you only have to pay for 10% of what you had been paying for before you put that capacitor in. Because that's the default circuit when you open up my clone of Paul Fawcett simulator. And you look at the wattage values, and it's only 10% that you end up spending when you use the capacitor in the middle, when you engage it, when you switch it on. So it's like, whoa. I said in that, the text portion, it's a 10,000% improvement of efficiency, because you're saving, 90% of your cost. So that's 10% times 100%, which is actually only 1,000%. Where did I get 10,000%? Oh no, it wasn't 10%, it was 1%. You spend only 1% and you recycle 99%. That's right. So you only have to pay for 1%. Oh my, that's why it was 10,000%. I forgot about that. Wow. That's cool. Using a 1.4 microfarad capacitor. That is pretty cool. So that's what I've been slaving away recently, and trying to wrap my head around. And it was good that I did. I got out of worry mode, and then I realized that's cold electricity. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong at all. So we have been duped. We are dupes. There's no question about it. So you see all the steps of progress here. It's not just a question of understanding Eric Dollard, which is, challenging enough as it is, without disagreeing with anything that he says, because everything he says is true to form. It's true to life. But the additional problem is, well, what sense does that can we make of what Eric is saying versus what conventional electrical engineering wisdom says on that same topic? Well, they won't talk about it, but they do. But they talk about it in a different way with different words, and so you don't know they're talking about it. That's the problem. And so we got to straddle both worlds. We got to learn to be a chameleon and change the color of our skin. Oh, I'm a conventional person because I'm talking in normal words, in a normal way. And then I switch to this other way and going, what? Where is he? What, has he got a bifurcation of the brain or something? Well, what is this? He's making like he's talking the same things, but he's saying it differently. He's using our words instead of those other words, and our concepts instead of those other concepts. Is he making any sense, or is he just throwing it all together and mixing it all up? And confusing. Oh, he's confused. We have to straighten him out if he's willing to be helped. That's one thing that conservatives are very shy of, most of them. Oh, you people are all alike. You don't want to listen to reason, to reality check. Hey, the table can swing both ways, you know? It could go in your ballpark too, you know? Well, I think I got bored with eating dinner, and that's why I had to make this video. I don't think I'm going to eat. Okay, enough of that. A little off topic. Okay. I'm getting better, you know. I don't do that as often as I used to, but, you know, lately I've been kind of tempted. Just for the hell of it. Oh, and I cuss, too. Oh, my God. I use four little language. It's for us little puny brains, you know. The little language for the little brains. Oh, God. For us little people. I don't know why I gotta laugh at that. Oh, maybe because I'm tired of being stomped on. No, I don't know. Anyway, forgiveness is in the air. We have redemption. We have hope. Yes, there is hope. There's no denying it. Whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. It's true. The bad part is when it's killing us. You know, when we get past that part, it's like, whew, boy, is that a relief. And then you realize, yeah, I actually feel better than, thank you for killing me. You know, you're supposed to thank your beneficiary, even though they were killing you, right? You made me stronger. And so that means the conservatives are going to have a hard time. They're going to either freak out or give up more quickly. You know, it's like, God, that guy really is talking like he's making sense to himself. But we know otherwise, right? We know better. Yeah, only he. Oh my God, he's so far gone. Don't even try to help him. Just give him a pill and pat him on the head or on the back, you know. And good dog. You know, here's your biscuit. Got drugs in it, but here's your biscuit. Here's your little doggy bone to gnaw on. You know? Oh. Oh. I don't have the energy for all this laughing. And I don't have any gurgly sounds in my tummy. Oh, something different is going on. Well, through with that nightmare. So I guess I'll shut up now because I'm kind of done with coming up with things to say. So this is my break because I'm kind of tired of working, and tomorrow I'll finish up and then post this latest variation on a magnetic amplifier using a transformer to model the motor load instead of a pair of coils, which makes more sense because a motor has magnetizable cores in its well, if it's an AC motor, in its stator coils, and then it has a squirrel cage, which is a magnetizable object, for its rotor to serve as the rotor coil without the coils, but the rotor inductor, the rotorized inductor, the inductive rotor, because it's still a counterpoising of two magnetizable entities, one being the stator, the other being the rotor, regardless of coils here, there, not, whatever. So I think a transformer is a closer model than a pair of air core coils. Because who uses air core coils in an electric motor anyway? Doesn't make any sense unless you have to go with high switching speeds, maybe. Now, this particular circuit has a very high frequency, and the impedance is 1 ohm. Talk about cold electricity. I couldn't believe it. I looked at the amps, I looked at the volts, and they were exactly the same units of measurement. Sorry, I have more things to say. I was flabbergasted. 1 ohm of impedance? That's unheard of. And the frequency was high, because I told you the efficiency was higher. So the frequency was 367.65 kilohertz. So obviously you got to use a bladeless turbine situation with a water conduit. I thought I made that up when I told somebody about it. And I'm reading Eric Dahl had already thought of it. So I must have a mind lock with the guy now, I think like an Eric. I don't know if I talk like one, but I don't think entirely like him. But I mean, I'm coming up with ideas that he's already come up with, and I guess it's because there are consequences to taking his point of view in a more involved way. I don't want to say seriously, just with a greater understanding so that I can make use of it more to a greater degree, which means I'm able to think of the same consequences that he's already thought of. So it shows I'm setting a groove now. I'm getting into his groove, is what it is, of thinking along a certain line of reasoning. And that's a good sign, Even though I have no engineering background, I can't do the math, and I don't want to. I can do the other stuff, I can extrapolate, based on generalizations and then let the simulator take care of all the math, Let it take care of the math, I don't want to deal with that. I have enough trouble just with Ohm's law, I stick to one law and I don't deal with any other, because it took me a long time to get the hang of that one. And then there's Mohs law, and I thought I made that up, and somebody else has already thought of that, and it might have been Eric, MHO, the reciprocal, the negative resisting version of Ohm's law. So it's like I can't come up with anything original anymore. Oh, I feel so sorry for myself. And I thought I was. No. And that's supposed to be a good sign. It just kind of diminishes the size of the ego. It kind of shrinks real quick. Kind of like what balls do when they're cold, Wow, where'd they go? Oops. Well, that's the decomposition of electricity. The decomposition of a surge. Oh, there we go. Oh, I heard a mini slosh. Oops, I have a little mini bubble in my tummy. Okay. I still have a little gas. Anything else? Oh, so I'm calling it Ideal EV. And I'm surprised I haven't used up that is.gd shortcut yet. But I didn't. So I've used best, I've used better, I've used good, not ideal. I've used perfect, I think, but not ideal. I'm just googling a lot. Oh. Yeah, Ideal EV with and without the underscore in between. With the underscore is the CMF version. And I found out CMF is actually an extension for several other softwares. So for now on, when I have any kind of reference to CMF in my circuit, I'm putting in, as a rote habit, the shortcut link to get to sourceforge.net and download the circuit mod, the Java version of Paul Falstad's simulator that somebody else wrote. But it's a freestanding, so it's not tied to the browser, unlike Paul Falstad's Java is tied to the browser environment. You close the browser, the Java module closes as well. It's like, what? I didn't want that to happen. I have to use IE Explorer 9 or 11, I don't know which one I have in my system, to, pop open the Java module that lifts up out of the browser page. It doesn't stay in it, at least on my operating system. That's what happens. So, but if I close the browser, so it makes sense. So it shows it's still embedded, and it just doesn't look like that. Look like it's embedded, but it really is. It's tied to it, just not embedded, which is the same thing practically. practically, but not quite the same, because you can collapse one window and not the other. Whatever advantage that is. Okay, it's something. Let's see. So this really is an ideal EV at this point. I've been struggling with ideal because, who wants to run a motor off of unidirectional DC impulse spikes? You can't. So I was clueless. How the hell am I going to come up with a circuit that's over unity and produce AC sine waves? Not even the Pierce Arrow circuits that I did, the series of circuits, produces AC sine waves. I like to think that it is, but it's not. Just because I'm imagining doesn't make it so. It's DC. It's DC. So it fails on that factor alone to satisfy the story, the rumored story that we have acquired one way or another about Tesla's supposed demonstrations. So, so this magnetic amplifier is the only time I've been able to do this, to create a free energy environment in the circuit and produce AC power as well. When I'm not busy building it up, I'm busy spending it in an AC format. Which, hey, it's better than nothing. It's pretty cool. And if we supercool the AC motor, then... Actually, no, if we supercool everything, the circuitry and the AC motor, then the coasting duration before we have to switch back to escalation again, we'll be able to coast for a longer duration. So it might be helpful to try to figure out how do we do that, but you do it at room temperature. Because I know there's a trick for it. I remember reading somewhere, I just can't remember what it was, So that'll have to wait for another day of inspiration, or just good luck, and bumpling across it again, so that it can be made note of and put into the text of the circuit, as part of its instructions, to improve efficiency. But I'm pretty sure I remember reading somewhere there is an equivalent to room temperature, deep freezing of coils and whatnot to improve their efficiency. I just can't remember what it is off the cuff of my head. Your head has a cuff? Or did somebody cuff your head? Yeah, I think so. I'm cuffing it right now. Whatever. Well, it's kind of like a cough and a laugh and a chuckle, all rolled into one. Okay, I think I'm tired and I want to go to bed. It's like 1:20 in the morning. Arrivederci, my friend.